Might the Mueller investigation into possible collusion between the Russians and the Trump campaign come down to one man, my next guest, Roger Stone? The political operative who advised candidate Trump early on has repeatedly denied communicating with WikiLeaks during the 2016 campaign regarding the leak of Hillary Clinton's emails. Even this week, he was telling the Washington Post, quote, "There are no such communications, and if Steve Bannon says there are, he would be dissembling." But new evidence undermines this claim. The New York Times published an email trail proving otherwise of communications between Stone, Breitbart editor Matthew Boyle, and Steve Bannon, in which Stone claimed inside knowledge and promised more to come. Remember, in early October of the election year, Stone predicted that documents Julian Assange promised to make public would hurt Clinton's campaign, saying, quote, "Hillary Clinton is done, and I have total confidence that WikiLeaks and my hero Julian Assange will educate the American people soon. Hashtag lock her up." In the emails published by the Times, Breitbart editor Matthew Boyle follows up by asking, quote, "Assange, what's he got? Hope it's good." To which Stone replies, "It is. I'd tell Bannon, but he doesn't call me back." And then he assures Bannon in a subsequent communication that Assange will be providing, quote, "a load every week going forward." Perhaps trying to preempt the Times story, Stone himself published the emails in a Daily Caller opinion piece that was titled "The Treachery of Steve Bannon." Roger Stone, who's the author of Stone's Rules, joins me now. Roger, do you anticipate that when the midterms are over and Mueller is back in action in a public means, that you will be indicted?
Well, first of all, I have to respectfully disagree with your interpretation of everything you just said. Let's set some background so people can understand it. Here on CNN in June of 2016, Julian Assange said that he had a huge catch of material on Hillary Clinton. He repeated it again on Fox on August 24th. I had a tip from a journalist, Randy Credico, who told me that this was incendiary, a bombshell, devastating, incredible, would roil the race. I testified truthfully about that to the House Intelligence Committee. I have passed 2 polygraph tests asserting that I've never had any direct contact with Julian Assange or WikiLeaks. I had no advance notice of the actual content or source of their material. Now, the entire world expected Assange to drop the first tranche of this material on October 2nd when he scheduled a press event. When that did not happen, he did announce a specific schedule for weekly disclosures between that time and Election Day. So that was a matter reported by Politico, was not a secret, reflected in my email to Bannon. The reason that he did not release anything on the 2nd, I was told by my source, Mr. Credico, and I wrote on March 9th, 2018, was out of security concerns. Remember, Hillary Clinton had threatened to hit him with a drone, and even now he fears arrest and extradition. So everything in that email is public. My claim to Boyle that the material was good is based on a solid tip. So what I have done here is perfectly legal. I took a solid tip and entirely public information that can be gleaned from the WikiLeaks Twitter feed and by setting a Google News alert on Julian Assange and reading every interview to hype and punk and promote and posture and bluff the Democrats. That's politics.
Okay,
but it's not collusion.
I'm happy to hear the full explanation. What's the answer to my question? Do you think you're about to get indicted?
If the decision is made on the basis of evidence and facts and truth, the answer would be no. If this is a political vendetta, anything is possible.
You told the House Intel Committee a year ago that you had no advance knowledge of source or content regarding the WikiLeaks disclosures. What about the timing? Did you know? Did you have inside information? And I'm not talking about what was in the public domain. Did you, Roger Stone, have inside knowledge as to the timing of things to come?
Only that my source told me that it would come in October, and everybody expected that to be October 2nd when Assange scheduled a press event. Beyond that, I had no specific knowledge. But again, Assange tells Politico that he will have a weekly release every week before the election, and all election material will be published by Election Day, but the Washington Post reports Assange made some vague pledge of future publishing. This is a perfect example of fake news.
Okay, but Roger, your explanation is essentially one of you were paying very, very close attention to what was being reported on Assange, and you were only reflecting that in your own tweets. But let me ask this. October 3rd, Matthew Boyle of Breitbart asks, what does Assange has? I've already showed that tweet. I hope it's good. And your response is to say, it is. Well, what insight
Correct.
did you have to let him know that it was, or were you BSing?
No, hardly. My source, Mr. Credico, had told me it is a bombshell. It's devastating. It's incredible. It will roil the race. Those all fit the
You were just taking his word?
of good, Michael. Yes,
but you were just taking his word.
He had a 30-year relationship with a WikiLeaks lawyer, and he had interviewed Assange multiple times on radio. Yes. And by the way, it turned out to be correct.
October 4, you have that exchange with Bannon. Apparently now he does want to know what's on Roger Stone's mind after not taking your phone call. I'm just judging from the email exchange. And this is the email where you tell him that he can anticipate a load a week. I think your explanation here is to say, well, I was simply paying attention to what Assange himself had said publicly. Is that what you're saying?
5 hours prior to that email, Politico reports that Assange says there will be a publication a week and all U.S. election-related material would be published by Election Day. This was in the press. I am telling him a largely overlooked fact. At the time, Michael, most of the media focused on the fact that Assange had produced nothing of substance on that October 2nd presser. Very few reporters picked up the fact that he announced a specific weekly schedule and that he said all U.S. election material would be published by Election Day. So that's not proprietary.
Let me ask you about another one.
Does not. Go ahead.
Let me ask you another one. October 7. October 7 was the day the world learned of the Access Hollywood grab them by the P-tape. 30 minutes later comes the WikiLeaks dump relative to Podesta. Did you know something was coming about Podesta on the day that that occurred, meaning the All Access Hollywood revelation?
No, I did not. And Assange had already announced a weekly release schedule. But the idea that I somehow coordinated the release of that material to change the political narrative after the NBC Billy Bush tape is a falsehood. And I had no advance notice of the NBC tape either. I learned it on the street in Manhattan.
Why did you tell the Washington? Why did you say to the Washington Post just this week that Bannon would be dissembling to say otherwise, meaning on the issue of whether you'd had any contact with one another?
First of all, I have over 1 million emails. I did not recall this particular one, but I published it. Read my piece at the Daily Caller, picked up by the Drudge Report and heavily footnoted. By the way, I would also note Mr. Bannon has some animus for me because of a piece I wrote at the Daily Caller urging that he be terminated by President Trump, and 2 days later he was. So his agents leaked this email. It has a perfectly legal and reasonable and footnoted explanation. It most certainly does not prove any communication with Julian Assange or any advance notice of the content or the source of the WikiLeaks disclosures.
Final question. Michael Cohen now saying that he heard President Trump use racial expletives during the course of their association with one another. You've known Donald Trump, I think, even much longer than Michael Cohen. Have you ever heard him utter anything of a racist nature?
You know, I've known him for 40 years. I have never heard him say anything of the kind. I actually think his expectation for black voters was a little higher than perhaps expected because of his friendship with a number of black entertainers and athletes and rappers. Although if you will examine the results in Philadelphia, Milwaukee, Detroit, Cleveland, he actually does run between 2 and 4% ahead of where Mitt Romney
I know, but that's
ran.
not
Now,
what
you
I'm
may think
asking.
that's
But that's not what I'm
insignificant.
asking. Did you ever hear him use the N-word?
Never. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Look, Michael Cohen has become a tool of his new handlers, and this is a partisan attack. I've known Donald Trump for 40 years. I have never heard him make a racist comment. He had many African American friends.
Roger, thanks for being here.
Glad to be here.